Doom is a video game that I can only imagine was intended to make up for about a couple decades worth of insufficient and horribly unfun shooters. The new Doom I'm speaking of course, the one that came out in 2016, is arguably a masterpiece. At least the single-player campaign is, because interestingly enough, Doom is an excellent representation of both the good and bad of modern shooters in quite a few ways. To start this off on a bad note, in the hope that I can end this on a good note and hopefully leave a good taste in everybody's mouth by the end of this, let's think about the bad parts of Doom. So the multiplayer, the whole thing, everything about the multiplayer is garbage. The limitation of 2 weapons per loadout. First of all, the fact that there's loadouts in what should be the quintessential arena shooter is embarrassing. I hope that Certain Affinity, who I believe are the ones who developed the multiplayer, if I'm not mistaken, they outsourced. It definitely outsourced for the multiplayer. I know that for a fact. Whoever it was that developed the multiplayer should be ashamed of themselves. They should be making numerous apologies to everyone who has played the game, because the multiplayer is honestly a skid mark on an otherwise beautiful title. The multiplayer, to break it down bit by bit. First off, the loadouts. Doom is well, the multiplayer of the older Dooms would be what you would consider an arena shooter. Everyone starts off with the same basic weapon, and victory is usually determined in a team setting by map control and control over the power weapons, which would, or any weapons really, which would have the same spawn points, and you would have the advantage if you were to take the time and learn the maps. The new Doom takes this and throws it in the garbage, and then sets the garbage on fire, as it introduces loadouts, which are probably my least favorite new shooter trope, archetype, thing, whatever, mechanic, because while loadouts are intended to give you the feeling of customization and of optimization and being able to be a better player by having very well managed loadouts, or maybe even trying to have more fun by having well managed loadouts, I actually think it takes away some of the skill and some of the fun, in that instead of the winner being the player who knows his way around the game, who is the best at the game just raw out of skill, is now replaced by the player who knows the most overpowered combination rather of weapons, and has the most bases covered with their pre-made party favors bag of gift, whatever, garbage. So that's one major flaw I find with the multiplayer. Another major flaw is the entirety of the perk system. It's a death card perk type system where you're only allowed to use one either at the beginning of the match or after every death. It takes effect during your time you spend alive, which makes it essentially indistinguishable from perks from Call of Duty. And I think that perks, along with loadouts, are the death of the arena shooter. They tend to, again, reduce the I wouldn't say skill necessarily, because it has nothing to do with skill. It has more to do with victory, so it's more of a victory ceiling. The requirements for victory are no longer skill-based. They're now based on looking up what works with what, in what sense, how you can abuse weapon combinations, and so on. And that's not fun to me. I find that that's really an uninteresting thing to do with multiplayer. I always gravitate towards multiplayer games that focus more on the individual skill and don't necessarily rely on the strongest weapons in terms of what you start off with, but instead the strongest weapons in terms of what you find, what you can make use of. For example, one of my favorite shooters, which many will take exception with is Halo 3. I think that Halo 3 was the last, to my memory, besides possibly Reach, but that had loadouts, so I don't know. Halo 3 was the last good arena shooter we've had, for consoles at least. PC has the very recent Unreal Tournament for the Unreal 4 engine, whatever that came out. I played that a bit, that was fun. But Halo 3 feels to me like the last good one I've played, and it had all of the aspects that I think make up a good arena fighter shooter. You have maps that have very specific spawn points for different objects and weapons, different vantage points that help you if you have certain weapons, such as sniping points, and places where you can go with a shotgun and mow down anybody in the way, and generally have a good KD by the end, which, I mean, whatever. And it had weapons that when you start off with, like the assault rifle, and I think the pistol, I forget, it's been a while. But everybody starts off with the same weapon. They have to. The stronger weapons are equidistant from both spawns. To my knowledge, I don't remember any maps that were asymmetrical in terms of weapon and item placement. But it would basically be the key to victory was map control and weapon control and vehicle control. Halo had vehicles, which is something I appreciate greatly. And after that came Reach, which had loadouts, which, while limited in terms of variety, usually in matchmaking matches there would be like, oh, you can use the DMR and the jetpack, and that's one class, and then you can have the armor lock and the assault rifle, and that's one class, and you can have the whatever with the whatever, that's another class, and that's how it was set up. So it was loadouts, you wouldn't be able to customize them. You would be given set loadouts, which technically everybody starts off with the same thing, and I think that still allows for some individual skill and map knowledge. They still had the power weapons placed around. And then the next mainline title, Halo 4, took that and tore it in half and decided that power weapons should be a kill streak, just like Call of Duty, and that you should be able to decide what weapons you start off with and what grenades you start off with, just like Call of Duty. And generally what I'm trying to say is that the Call of Duty class-based multiplayer has slaughtered the arena shooter, and games that have adopted these Call of Duty-esque mechanics, to me, are inherently less skill-based and less interesting to play than games that do not have those features. I don't know. Back to Doom. So yeah, the multiplayer is borderline irredeemable. They'd have to make severe overhauls in terms of gameplay to make that a passable, workable thing, which is embarrassing because the not only has the community died down on the Doom servers, but they also have a season pass exclusively for multiplayer content, which was not at all the selling point of the game. Well, which was the selling point of the game in their eyes, but not to anybody else. It was more of a detriment. People say ignore the multiplayer because it's bad, and just play the single player, which is excellent. But that's enough about the multiplayer. The next final bad thing really, is Snap Map, which again is like part of this grand modernization of shooters, where rather than having mod support and giving you interesting map creation tools and such, it gives you a dumbed down console map creator that is inferior in every way to other console creators. They said infinite possibilities and all kinds of game types and interesting stuff, and while some of that is possible, I find that the Halo Forge is actually an all-around better tool, because even though it's a slightly more limited, at least it doesn't pretend to be anything more than a map customization tool, and for Forge World type maps, a map editing tool, or map creation tool rather, for the Forge type maps. And Snap Maps is they essentially say, oh, it's just like modding, you can make whatever, and I find that to be false. You can't do anything with SnapMap other than make levels that they ordain as okay. Some people have done interesting things, like the farming simulator and the, which is, that's going to be another video about simulators. And there's a musical level, and that was interesting. It was all in the same blank warehouse slate, because they're not adding content for that for a while. They have all the planned DLC for SnapApp is free, which is great, but it's not a modding tool set. It's not a open moddable thing, so it doesn't matter. And really, this modernization of shooters comes from the fact that shooters are now iterative, rather than being standalone. Like, nobody puts out a first-person shooter these days and says, that is it, here is the first-person shooter, this will be the only first-person shooter of this type, it does something unique, and it will be the only one. Now, every shooter has sequels, so rather than allow for creativity that will elongate a game's life far past what the expiration date, in theory, would be, now games are being limited such that people have to buy the newest version to have the best content and the most up-to-date content and be able to play with everybody else. Examples of this are obviously the Call of Duty franchise. There hasn't been genuinely good modding materials, I don't believe, for a very good long time. And this seems to be a phenomenon that only really exists in first-person shooters. To my limited knowledge, I haven't played every video game, I haven't played every series, so I don't know if that's a more common thing in other genres as well. But, like, for example, the Fallout games, the RPGs, and the Elder Scrolls games, those are all openly moddable, and you can freely mod it, and players are given actual creative freedom, which you won't find in the shooter genre anymore. There's Overwatch, as good as it is, doesn't have any kind of modding API or custom tools or whatever. And I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm talking about in terms of the technical aspects. Maybe Overwatch is just a game that is difficult to... The engine is... It's all proprietary bullshit, and maybe it's all difficult to work with and stuff, and they don't expect people to... But regardless, there's not going to be mods for Overwatch coming out with new game modes or anything. It's all going to be straight from Blizzard, which is fine, quality control and all that, but... I still don't like that lack of control that's given creatively. And again, back to Doom, and why I want to talk about Doom, is that Doom, as much as it mirrors the bad things in modern gaming and all the bad aspects, Doom has a lot of good things going for it. It has a lot of care and passion put into the single player. The single player campaign is a masterwork of shooting and action and ultra violence and combat. It feels nice. It's much faster than any other first-person shooter currently on the market. It's honestly the best shooter experience I've had since the earlier Halo games, in my opinion, other than TF2 and Overwatch, I suppose. But for a game of its type, it's fantastic. Anybody who has Doom will attest that the single player is the crowning achievement. There's nothing really that comes to mind that's wrong with the single player rather. All the weapons are equally paced with it throughout. It's a challenge to find everything, but it's not impossible to get every little nook and cranny and get every little bonus and object. And some objects, some collectibles and stuff are hidden really brilliantly and have actually genuinely interesting puzzles that you have to solve, which is rare in a first-person shooter, that they would, put effort into something. But it really, I feel, outdid themselves, and it's weird because this Doom reminds me a lot of it feels like there's a resurgence of classic games being remade as just better versions of themselves, or at least equally as good, if not better. Like the new Wolfenstein, the New Order, that was a fantastic video game. And just like the new Doom, there was the original Wolfenstein so many years ago, and the new Wolfenstein kind of harkened back to those older games by having just the same general feeling well, not. I guess that's kind of weird to say because the original Wolfenstein games were old. They're very dated. You can very much feel the age. But the new Wolfenstein takes some of those ideas and philosophies of the old Wolfenstein, such as having every weapon on a wheel and just having the weapons all at once. I find that to be excellent that they would do that. Stuff like that, just like old gaming conventions, I really appreciate. It was fairly fast. You pick up armor and health that doesn't necessarily, it regenerates very slowly and to a limited amount, rather than having a can of jelly that is sprayed on your screen every once in a while that you wipe off, and then when you get shot, you put on more jelly, and then you wipe it off again over and over. That I always found is regenerating health was done well in games such as Halo 1 specifically, where there was a regenerating shield and a health bar, and you could and your health bar didn't regenerate, but your shield did. I feel like Halo 1 they should have stuck with that health style, because the Halo 2 regenerating shield and Halo 3, I feel both were okay, but I would have preferred the Halo 1 style health, which they tried to bring back in Reach, but it had a better regeneration, the health mattered less, and you couldn't take as many hits, so that was kind of pointless. But with Doom, it really genuinely feels like Doom, like a Doom game. Like Doom 1, Doom 2, Doom 2016. That's a natural progression. And funnily enough, the Doom 3 had the same hit with modernization and turning into a survival horror that I think makes it a generally inferior game to the new Doom. And Doom as a franchise, like if you look back at the pre-Doom talk, like the discussions, Doom was not something everybody looked forward to. No, it became sort of an ominous cloud floating over everybody, as we all said that it was going to be terrible and we shouldn't expect anything. Thankfully, for those of us who kept our heads up and hoped for the best, we got the best. We got literally the best thing that could have come out of them, aside from literally just making another, like, as far as I'm concerned, they could have released a new WAD for Doom 2 or the original Doom, and just called that a sequel, and I would have been like, that's hilarious. I don't know I don't know of any developers that would actually do that, but that would be amazing. But I'm getting off the point. I'm very tired. It is very late. I don't wanna be here all night. Suffice it to say that Doom is good. It has the old feel to it. Doom is the first sequel I've played where I'm like, this is the most natural evolution of the original in terms of sequel is unfair. Reboot is more accurate to what I'm trying to say. It's the most faithful reboot, I think. And for me, games and stories, I find that while gaming is a very unique and interesting way to address a story and tell a story, sometimes I kind of think I just want to have a game, a good game, rather than have them split their focus and do some story and some good gameplay. I'd rather have just a fantastic game, even if at the cost of story. And it's not like we can't have both, but if we were to have one or the other, I much prefer a good game with a thin layer of story as opposed to a book with the game wrapped around it. And in this new game, in this new Doom, story just doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And Doom just poops all over the idea of a story. The very first expositionary dump you get is shoved out of the way, literally shoved by the main character out of the way, so that he can go and kill more demons. And that is probably the best thing that has happened in gaming for years. This is going on for a little bit long, so I'm gonna wrap up. Doom is good. It's good Doom. I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you haven't played it. It's genuinely one of the best shooters I've played in a very, very long time. I definitely count it up amongst the greats, and despite its flaws, I still think that the single player at least shines through and is enough to carry the game as far as it needs to go. I recommend it. It's fun. It's hard. It's a good time all around. I mean, this wasn't really a review. It was more just a discussion I wanted to have, but I feel like that's the best way to end it, is the same way I would end a review, and so I gotta say, Doom is highly recommended. Doom is good. Go play Doom. Whatever.